What is going on, my friends? Derek Palze here, and welcome back to the third official episode of The Shell Game. I'm excited to be back with you guys this week after an entire weekend of super wild card games. It was fantastic. We were 5 out of 6 in our predictions, and in this episode we are going to do an overview of each of the divisional round games. All 4 of them, they're power packs, they're exciting. A couple of them people are sleeping on. A couple of them the entire league is, in my opinion, wrong in the sense of the odds of who's going to win the games. Nonetheless, we are going to make our predictions because in the Raiders versus Bengals game, we already knew that one. The Bills versus the Pats, I knew that was going to be a blowout. The only one that I got a little bit wrong was I thought the Chiefs were going to buy into the hype a little bit, being at home, be a little bit sloppy like they were in the first half of the season. I get the 8-game winning streak. I get Patrick Mahomes and Hill and Kelsey. I get the whole flow. I just thought the maturity and the poise and what it meant to the Steelers was going to potentially set up one of the worst upsets of the wild card weekend. And boy, was I wrong. So other than that, got the LA and Cardinals game, got the San Francisco and Dallas game, and got the Tampa Bay and Eagles game correct, as most people probably did. So hopping into the divisional round, we are first going to start with the handy dandy stats here. We have the Bills versus the Chiefs. Let's go. Bills versus the Chiefs. I understand the betting odds. I understand the negative 125 favorite for the Chiefs. I understand the plus 105 underdog for the Bills. However, I believe that media outlets, I believe that commentators, I believe that the league in general is quite partial and biased towards the Kansas City Chiefs, and rightfully so. They're an exciting team to watch. They always show up. They play great. They had that 8-game winning streak with only the loss prior to the playoffs in a first half of the season that didn't quite go their way. I understand. However, I don't think we're considering recent history in both the win and the loss in January and October of this season against the Chiefs. What caused the win, what caused the loss, as well as beyond the hype in the game versus the Pats in the Super Wild Card weekend. It wasn't just a game versus the Pats where it was all hype and happenstance that the Bills did this. This was a Bills team that showed up on every side of the game of the football, and it showed. And that's the team that you can definitely expect in the divisional round. That being said, I do believe that the Bills have a gap against the short game, which if there's anybody in the league who has a short game at an elite level is going to be Patrick Mahomes, Kelsey, Hill, and the rest of the Kansas City offense. So their slant routes, their drag routes, their out routes, anything that has to do within that 5 to 15 yard play is going to be problematic for the Bills, especially once you start spreading the Bills out. I talked about in the last episode how the Bills are a unified, cohesive defense, not only just in talent, but also in individual play styles. When they show up, they're always 2, 3, 4 players deep on making a play on the ball, whether it is putting pressure on the quarterback, whether it is pass rushing, whatever it is, they're 2 to 3 players deep on every play on the ball. And that is something that you're going to have to spread out if you want to crush against the Bills. And I do think that the Kansas City Chiefs are apt to do that. However, I also believe that if the Bills shut down one of the 3 areas, if they can stop either the run, the short game, or the long game, that is where you're going to see the Kansas City Chiefs fall to the Bills. Because when you get into that one-dimensionary or two-dimension offense, you're not going to get past the Bills and give them enough looks to where you're going to confuse the secondary, to where you're going to confuse those linebackers in Klein, in Milano, and in Edwards. You're just not going to confuse them unless you can spread them out and thin out that defense a little bit, because there's depth there. So that being said, let's actually look back into the past 2 games and what was the big difference. Because if the Bills come the way I think they're going to come, which is mature on offense, defense, special teams, which is playing as a unit, which is playing fun football, right? Not just mature football, but fun football, making plays that you typically don't see and really enjoying the game. I think that Allen, Singletary, and McKenzie have to be a triple threat, maybe a 2-2-1 ratio in regards to Allen, Singletary being even in their attempts, and throwing McKenzie in there just to throw the Kansas City Chiefs off, and you'll see the Bills come out on top. But these past 2 games, right? The one that the Bills lost against the Chiefs. So during this game, the Buffalo Bills did not show up on offense. And they showed up on offense in ways that didn't matter, right? At the end of the day, I believe they had 4 total field goals. They weren't getting the ball in the end zone. Allen had a rushing touchdown. Let's see what else they had here. Passing yards were there, time of possession was there, and ultimately they just didn't get the ball into the field. Meanwhile, Kansas City Chiefs, 2 rushing touchdowns, 325 yards. Kelsey had 2 touchdowns. Hardman had a touchdown, had an interception, and they pulled out on top, right? That's why the Chiefs win. If you look at the other game, though, listen to this, my friends. The Bills win when Josh Allen has 315 passing yards, 1 touchdown. You get Sanders and Knox in there with 3 touchdowns. And then the defense shows up, thank you, for 2 interceptions, 2 fumbles, and you put the Chiefs away. I believe that game was somewhere like 38-20 or 38-24, something like that. Chiefs were only held to 272 offensive yards, and that is the Bills team that you are going to see show up in this game against the Kansas City Chiefs. So the Kansas City Chiefs are going to have to spread out that linebacker position, as well as just spreading out the defense and not accepting pressure from the Bills, because if the Bills put pressure on Patrick Mahomes and rush him from the outside to contain him, because you can't let him Josh Allen and Patrick Mahomes outside of the pocket because he's going to make plays happen. If they can contain him and rush from the outside while not getting spread thin, you are going to see the Bills repeat the same exact thing, if not a little bit worse, against the Kansas City Chiefs, with the Bills being in the 30s and the Kansas City Chiefs being in the 20s. Now, the Kansas City Chiefs do come alive in that second and that third quarter, and they know how to play hurry-up football. So that's where you're going to see a lot of back and forth if they do find themselves in a compromised position. But my pick for the divisional round of the playoffs is the Bills pulling out by, again, at least 10 points against their opponents, and finally getting the credit they deserve as the Buffalo Bills, led by Allen and McDermott. Next up, my friends, we have Tampa Bay Buccaneers versus the Los Angeles Rams. And this is going to be a game based off of who shows up, who's healthy, and what defense and which offense actually shows up. What type of defense and offense are we getting from both teams? Because when you look at the Rams defense, this is an interesting stat that I don't think is being talked about enough. So obviously you have Tom Brady on the other side of the football when you're talking the Rams defense. So you're not just talking about any quarterback who can make things happen. You're talking about Tom Brady, whereas if you leave even a sliver of a gap, he is going to make something happen and make sure the ball is in the right place to the right player at the right time. So the Rams are almost at the bottom third in the entire NFL in the 2021 season for passing yards allowed, well into the 4,000s, right? However, out of all of those passing yards that they allowed, they're only the second team, only to the Bills, in touchdowns allowed off of those. So they're able to stop when it actually matters in the red zone. However, that's when you're not playing Tom Brady, who knows how to execute and get the ball into the end zone. So that's going to be the most interesting statistical matchup in the playoffs, I believe, is a quarterback who knows how to get it into the end zone against a defense who knows how to stop the ball from getting into the end zone. So which statistic shows up, which offense, which defense shows up in regards to that? And then on Brady's side, you have a lot of really inconvenient discrepancies with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers that are going to require himself, as well as Gronk and the other players on the team, some who have experience, some who don't, to really step up and make things happen. Is the offensive line going to be healthy? They were healthy there for a while and rated one of the best against the rush, protecting Tom Brady, which is why he can make so many things happen. But then injuries and then inconsistencies, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I just saw recently, I think yesterday or was it today, that Leonard Fournette actually was at practice. Is he going to come back, and is he going to be a factor and kind of diversify the Tampa Bay Buccaneers' ability to attack against that Los Angeles Rams defense? So it will be interesting to see. Of course, he's going to get the plays. Of course, he's going to get the yardage. Can he get the ball into the end zone? And is Leonard Fournette going to help him and assist him in doing so? Because we already know Gronk's going to get a grab. We already know he's going to diversify and get Evans in there. He's going to get a couple grabs. So they're going to score on both sides of the football. Let me just say that the Rams versus the Tampa Bay Buccaneers are going to be just scoring all game, every single quarter. So I believe that the Tampa Bay Buccaneers win if that offensive line can get Brady into that cadence. He's so beautiful when he gets into a cadence because you can't stop him. It may not be 30, 40, 50 points in regards to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers destroying the Rams. However, if you allow Brady to just hum every single quarter, he's going to break that down. And then you also have some, which I believe people underestimate quite a bit, some of the social dynamics. At the time of this recording at 4:18 on January 19th, we don't know what the verdict is going to be with OBJ getting tested for PEDs, right? He's been crushing since he's been on the Rams, and he just got called in to get tested. Do not underestimate the effect of social image when it comes to very important games like the playoffs. There's so much hype around him. Obviously, the head coach has a lot of belief in, Sean McVay has a lot of belief in OBJ, right? And he adds a lot of charisma and zeal to the team. Imagine if he comes back and he tests positive for anything. That's going to be a huge hit to the morale of the team, and that could affect the type of Rams that we see show up against Brady. So we also have some outside factors that could potentially affect things aside from injuries. So ultimately, I do believe it's going to be a high scoring game. Initially, my gut reaction was the Rams are going to pull this off and really put it to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. But something is just telling me, do not say that, Derek Palizé. Do not say that on this show that Tom Brady is going to lose against the Rams, because if he can stop if the defense can stop Stafford underthrows, he throws interceptions, he's all over the place. And when he's on, but he's on against teams who aren't the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. So I say the Tampa Bay Buccaneers pull it off with mature football in the fourth quarter and are able to pull away by just about a score. No more than 10 points is going to be a close game, and the Buccaneers come out on top with the W in the divisional round against the Los Angeles Rams. All right, my friends, so staying in the NFC, we have the San Francisco 49ers versus the Green Bay Packers, and that's going to be a home game that is going to be tough for the 49ers, especially when Green Bay is well and rested, as we all know. That's the stuff we do know. Now, in the last overview with the Buccaneers versus the Rams, we had a very competitive statistical matchup. In this game, we have a little bit of an awkward or an oblong statistical matchup in the fact that the Green Bay Packers have allowed 31 passing touchdowns, but also have had 18 interceptions. So the same defense that allowed some of the most touchdowns to happen through the air also had tied for some of the most interceptions in the league. But Garoppolo's really not as much of a threat in the air as much as the San Francisco 49ers can be a threat on the ground with Debo and Mitchell. However, the Green Bay defense only allowed 8 times for a rush to go longer than 20 yards, as well as just outside of the top 1/3 in rushing yards allowed in their defense. So even though that the league is singing from the mountaintop that, Mitchell and Debo could be a threat against the Green Bay's lacking rush defense, I don't think that's telling a full data story there, because when you really look at it in a different way, are they that vulnerable with the rush defense, or are they actually present in areas where it really does matter? So when you have somebody in Debo who can average 7.2 yards per carry in a playoff game, but you're against a defense that hardly lets any 20+ yard rushes happen, does it matter if you have some gaps in there, if they're really not letting it get farther than maybe a few first downs that could help them on offense, which is still going to require Garoppolo to be diverse enough and open up that pass game to make sure the rushers can get the ball in the end zone. So I think that's really interesting. San Francisco's rush defense is great. They had the most fumbles, forced fumbles in the entire league, which I thought was also a really interesting statistic. So we'll see what happens there. I do believe that the Green Bay Packers obliterate the San Francisco 49ers. I think this is the biggest obliteration of the entire weekend. I think it's a blowout. I think we have a couple glimmers of hope in the first and second with Garoppolo and his offense. However, I just don't think the offense gets it done. I definitely don't think the San Francisco defense gets it done. A couple more statistics on the San Francisco 49ers to maybe support that cause. The 5th most sacks. So, I guess that doesn't really support it, but I mean, it's Aaron Rodgers and the Green Bay Packers. They're going to get some yards. They're going to get some touchdowns, and also 6 least passing yards allowed. Does it play in their favor enough to overturn the fact that they're going to get smacked in the face at home? Away when Green Bay Packers are at home? I don't think so. I don't think Jimmy Garoppolo gets it done. I think Aaron Rodgers in the offense there gets it done. I think their defense shuts Garoppolo down, confuses him, makes it look like the tough team that we're used to seeing in the San Francisco 49ers is non-existent. I think he makes them look like pansies, and they end up pulling away with the largest spread and the largest obliteration of the entire divisional round. And last but not least, back in the AFC, we have the Titans versus the Bengals. We have arrested Titans, obviously. We have a Derrick Henry-filled Titans, hopefully back in full capacity after not playing for a while. We have depth there, but we have some interesting oblong statistics in this matchup too, and one of the most, I believe, under-talked and under-anticipated games of the divisional round. So on the Tennessee defense side, in the air, we have 4,168 yards in passing allowed. We have 2 times the amount of passing touchdowns as rushing touchdowns allowed, and we have 226 more passing first downs than we have rushing first downs, against obviously a dynamic duo in Burrow and chasing the rest of the Cincinnati offense in the air, being able to make things happen in the air. You don't want, if you're Tennessee, your statistics on passing defense to hold true in this game, because you will get obliterated with an unexpected amount of yards in the air that could potentially turn into quite a few touchdowns if Cincinnati can complement that with the running game, which obviously that's been on and off for the last several games, especially in the last game. And also on the other side of the football, you have a Cincinnati team who is the 5th most rushing yards allowed team in the entire NFL. And even in their win against the Raiders, they allowed a lot of rushing to happen against them. I mean, let's not forget that that game just happened. So I think that with the depth that you have arrested, and hopefully, like I said, 100% Henry, you have Hilliard and Foreman for depth there and for diversity there to keep people fresh. But when it comes down to it, the playoffs are going to come down to controlling the time about halfway through the third quarter and into the fourth quarter. And when you have 3 running backs that can get it done against a team that ranks 5th in rushing yards allowed, that's also a statistic, if you're the Bengals, that you don't want to hold true in this game. So both sides of the football, for both teams, for both opponents, for both contenders, they have some statistics that they cannot allow to ring true if they don't want this game to go the opposite way. So even though that Tennessee is a minus 200 favorite and the Bengals, let's see here, are a plus 170 underdog, I disagree officially here in the 3rd episode of the Shell Game. Now, do I think that it's enough to turn it over? I will tell you in a second, but I do think that this should be a much more balanced of an odd, as well as much more talked about of a game. I think that everybody anticipates Tennessee to come in here, be rested, run all over the Bengals, and run up the score in a way that makes the Bengals look like they should not belong in the playoffs. I personally believe it's going to be far closer than you think it's going to be. And I think if this is my only if in the divisional round, if Burrow makes it happen in the air, I think the Bengals pull away by a touchdown in the end, and Tennessee does not make it happen. Let me say that again. Tennessee does not make it happen. I was hesitant to say this after getting the one prediction wrong with the Steelers upset over the Chiefs. That was a bad statistic to get wrong, a bad prediction, a bad game to get wrong, and I could be potentially setting myself up for the same exact thing in the Tennessee Titans versus the Bengals. I just don't see them coming in and being able to stop and change around the passing defense statistics that have plagued their team for this entire year. I don't see it happening. Not enough people are talking about it. Everybody's talking about the depth at running back. Everybody's talking about Tannehill's ability to make it happen. He's been inconsistent too. So I just think the Tennessee Titans come in here, and as well as they play in those very contending games, I'm a Bills fan. I remember when they knocked us out right before the playoffs in that crazy I still think it's debatable whether it was a forward or a backwards lateral. Obviously, the replay showed it was slightly forward by a couple inches or slightly backwards, and they got that. But I remember they play when it matters, but those are games where everything is on the line, and everything's in the line here, but everything's in the line from the standpoint of you have to keep performing after this game. They knew they weren't going to go very far in the playoffs every time that they've showed up in past games like that, and then they get knocked out quick or they just flat out don't make it. So there's also that side of the football where it doesn't have to do with skills. It has to do with maturity and poise, and I don't think the Tennessee Titans have what it takes to make it. I think that the stigma around the Bengals, around the potential that's in Burrow as a quarterback and what he's been able to do and perform, I think that pulls through, and the Bengals pull off by a very, very tight win by 7 points or less, and potentially a game that goes into overtime. But I think the Bengals pull it off and surprise everybody this weekend. I have the Bengals winning against the Tennessee Titans in the divisional round of the playoffs. All right, enough of these stats. It is time to watch the playoffs this weekend. I'm really excited. Thank you for tuning into the Shell Game. My name is Derek Palze, at Derek Palze on Twitter, on TikTok, on Instagram. Come find me, come interact with me, come engage with me. I'm going to be highly active on Twitter as all of this is unfolding, and all of my opinions are either coming true or my predictions are being proved false. This has been the third episode of the Shell Game, and we will see you in a few days.